World War II. The very name evokes images of bombed-out cities, desperate battles, and unimaginable atrocities. It was a conflict that touched every corner of the globe, leaving an indelible mark on the 20th century and beyond. From 1939 to 1945, nations clashed in a titanic struggle that tested the limits of human endurance and redefined the very meaning of warfare. The scale of the conflict was unprecedented. Millions of soldiers took part in battles fought across vast distances, from the deserts of North Africa to the frozen wastelands of the Eastern Front. New technologies emerged, forever altering the face of combat. Tanks and airplanes, once novelties, became instruments of destruction on an industrial scale. But World War II was more than just a clash of armies. It was a clash of ideologies, a battle between freedom and tyranny, democracy and fascism. The stakes could not have been higher. The outcome of the war would determine the fate of nations and the future of the international order. To understand the outbreak of World War II, we must first look back to the ashes of the First World War. The Treaty of Versailles, intended to ensure a lasting peace, instead sowed the seeds of future conflict. Germany, burdened by crippling reparations and territorial losses, became fertile ground for extremist ideologies. The global economic depression of the 1930s further fueled instability and resentment. As unemployment soared and nations turned inward, the appeal of radical solutions grew. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party exploited the widespread discontent, promising national rejuvenation through expansion and racial purity. Meanwhile, in Japan, militaristic leaders, driven by their own imperial ambitions, embarked on a path of aggression in Asia. Italy, under the rule of Benito Mussolini, sought to revive the glories of the Roman Empire through conquest. The world watched with growing apprehension as the storm clouds gathered. On September 1, 1939, the fragile peace was shattered when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. This act of unprovoked aggression triggered a chain reaction, as Great Britain and France, honoring their commitments to Poland, declared war on Germany. World War II had begun. The early years of the war were marked by a series of stunning German victories. Utilizing a revolutionary new tactic known as Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, German forces swept through Poland, Denmark, Norway, and France with astonishing speed and ferocity. The seemingly invincible Nazi war machine seemed unstoppable. Yet, even as the Axis powers celebrated their early triumphs, the seeds of their eventual defeat were being sown. The invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, a colossal blunder of epic proportions, would prove to be a turning point in the war. The vastness of the Eastern Front, coupled with the fierce resistance of the Soviet people, would bleed the German army dry. The German invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941 marked the beginning of a titanic struggle that would shape the course of World War II. Driven by Hitler's delusional belief in a swift victory, the Wehrmacht, Germany's formidable war machine, surged eastward in a campaign of unprecedented scale and brutality. The initial German advances were swift and devastating, catching the Soviet forces off guard. The vast plains of the Eastern Front became a battleground of unimaginable ferocity. From the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, German and Soviet soldiers clashed in battles that dwarfed anything seen in human history. Millions of men and thousands of tanks and aircraft were thrown into the maelstrom. The fighting was relentless, fueled by ideological hatred and the bitter cold of the Russian winter. The Battle of Stalingrad, a grueling 6-month siege that began in August 1942, became a turning point in the war. The German Sixth Army, once considered invincible, found itself trapped and decimated in the ruins of the city. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's ambitions in the East. While the Eastern Front raged, another theater of war exploded in the Pacific. On December 7, 1941, Japan, seeking to establish dominance in Asia, launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, bringing the United States into the global conflict. The Pacific War was characterized by naval battles, island-hopping campaigns, and a level of brutality that shocked the world. Japanese forces, fueled by a sense of imperial destiny, swept through Southeast Asia, conquering Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Singapore in rapid succession. The speed and ferocity of the Japanese advance stunned the Allied powers, who found themselves ill-prepared for a war in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway, fought in June 1942, proved to be a decisive turning point in the Pacific War. American naval forces, aided by code-breaking intelligence, dealt a crippling blow to the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 aircraft carriers and killing hundreds of experienced pilots. Midway marked the beginning of the long and arduous Allied advance across the Pacific. The Mediterranean theater, often overshadowed by the titanic clashes on the Eastern and Pacific fronts, played a crucial role in the Allied war effort. The deserts of North Africa became a battleground for control of vital supply lines and access to the oil fields of the Middle East. German and Italian forces, led by the cunning Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, clashed with British and Commonwealth troops in a series of seesaw battles. The campaign in North Africa was characterized by its harsh conditions and fluid mobile warfare. Tanks and armored vehicles battled across vast expanses of sand and scrub, while overhead, aircraft dueled for supremacy of the skies. The struggle for North Africa was a war of logistics and endurance, with both sides struggling to maintain supply lines over vast distances. The Allied victory at El Alamein in Egypt in late 1942 marked a turning point in the North African campaign. Rommel's forces, exhausted and outmaneuvered, were driven back across Libya, eventually surrendering in Tunisia in May 1943. The Allied triumph in North Africa paved the way for the invasion of Italy and opened up a second front against the Axis powers. As 1943 dawned, the tide of World War II began to turn decisively in favor of the Allies. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad, coupled with the Allied successes in North Africa, signaled a shift in the balance of power. German forces, stretched thin across multiple fronts, found themselves increasingly on the defensive. In July 1943, Allied forces landed in Sicily, beginning the liberation of Italy. The Italian campaign proved to be a long and arduous slog, with German forces putting up stiff resistance in the mountainous terrain. However, the fall of Rome in June 1944 and the eventual surrender of Italy dealt a significant blow to Axis morale. On June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history took place as Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, in what became known as D-Day. The success of the D-Day landings marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany's grip on Western Europe. Allied forces, bolstered by a constant stream of reinforcements and supplies, pushed eastward, liberating Paris in August 1944 and driving towards the German border. While the early years of World War II saw a Europe ravaged by conflict and an Asia in the grip of Japanese expansion, the United States remained distant, clinging to a policy of isolationism. The shock of Pearl Harbor, however, shattered this illusion of neutrality, propelling the United States into the global maelstrom. American entry into the war would prove to be a turning point, tipping the scales in favor of the Allies. The United States, with its vast industrial might and resources, became the arsenal of democracy, supplying its allies with much-needed weapons, ammunition, and material. American factories churned out tanks, planes, and ships at an astonishing rate, providing a lifeline to the beleaguered British and Soviet forces. Beyond material aid, the United States also committed millions of troops to the fight, deploying soldiers and airmen to battlefields across the globe. American GIs fought with courage and determination in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, playing a crucial role in the Allied victories to come. The influx of American manpower and resources would prove decisive in turning the tide of the war. Great Britain, standing alone against the Nazi onslaught in the early years of the war, became a symbol of defiance and resilience. Subjected to relentless bombing raids during the Blitz, the British people endured with a stoicism and determination that inspired the world. The Royal Air Force, outnumbered but undaunted, fought valiantly in the skies above Britain, ultimately denying Germany air superiority. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, with his stirring speeches and unwavering belief in victory, rallied the nation in its darkest hour. Churchill's leadership proved instrumental in maintaining British morale and forging a united front with the United States and the Soviet Union. Despite facing seemingly insurmountable odds, Britain never wavered in its commitment to defeating Nazi tyranny. The British war effort extended far beyond the shores of the island nation. The Royal Navy, maintaining control of the seas, played a vital role in protecting Allied shipping lanes and disrupting Axis supply lines. British forces fought with distinction in North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe, making significant contributions to the Allied war effort. The Soviet Union bore the brunt of the Nazi war machine, enduring a brutal conflict that cost millions of lives and left vast swaths of the country in ruins. The Eastern Front, stretching from the Arctic Circle to the Black Sea, witnessed some of the most horrific battles in human history. Soviet soldiers, fighting with a ferocity born of desperation and patriotism, played a pivotal role in defeating Nazi Germany. The Soviet people endured unimaginable hardships during the war. Cities were besieged, industries were dismantled and relocated, and millions of civilians were displaced or killed. Yet despite these hardships, the Soviet people rallied behind their leader, Joseph Stalin, determined to repel the invaders. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war, shattering the myth of German invincibility and bleeding the Wehrmacht dry. From that point forward, the Red Army steadily pushed westward, liberating Eastern Europe from Nazi occupation and ultimately capturing Berlin in a final cataclysmic battle. Section 4. The Axis Powers. A web of ambitions and errors. The Axis powers, united by a shared thirst for power and a disdain for the existing world order, embarked on a campaign of aggression that plunged the world into chaos. Driven by a toxic mix of nationalism, militarism, and racial ideology, Germany, Japan, and Italy sought to reshape the global map in their own image. Their ambitions, however, would ultimately prove to be their undoing. Nazi Germany, led by the fanatical Adolf Hitler, sought to establish a vast empire in Europe, fueled by a twisted ideology of racial supremacy. Japan, ruled by a militaristic government bent on expansion, aimed to create a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere under its dominion. Italy, under the leadership of Benito Mussolini, aspired to revive the glories of the Roman Empire through conquest. The Axis powers, however, were plagued by strategic blunders, internal divisions, and an underestimation of their enemies' resolve. Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation, while Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor brought the United States into the war, ultimately sealing the Axis' fate. Section 1. A World in Ruins, the Physical Scars of War. As the guns fell silent in 1945, the world surveyed the wreckage of the most destructive conflict in history. From the bombed-out cities of Europe to the devastated landscapes of Asia, the physical scars of war were everywhere. Entire cities lay in ruins, their streets reduced to rubble, their once proud buildings shattered beyond recognition. The industrial heartlands of Germany and Japan, once symbols of economic might, were crippled by Allied bombing raids. Transportation networks lay in shambles, bridges twisted and broken, rail lines severed, ports rendered unusable. The economies of both nations, geared entirely towards war production, lay in ruins, leaving their populations facing starvation and disease. The agricultural sectors of Europe and Asia, vital to feeding war-torn populations, had been ravaged by years of conflict. Fields lay fallow, livestock had been decimated, and farm labor was scarce. The combination of destroyed infrastructure, economic collapse, and agricultural devastation created a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented scale. Section 2. The Human Cost. A generation lost, innocence shattered. The true cost of World War II could never be measured in terms of destroyed buildings or economic output. It was the human cost. The millions of lives lost, and the countless others forever scarred by the horrors they had witnessed that cast the darkest shadow over the post-war world. An entire generation had been decimated, their potential extinguished on distant battlefields or in the twisted wreckage of bombed-out cities. The horrors of the Holocaust, the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany, stood as a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. The use of atomic bombs against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, while intended to end the war swiftly, unleashed a terrifying new form of warfare and left an enduring legacy of fear and uncertainty. Beyond the staggering death toll, millions more bore the invisible scars of war. Soldiers returned home physically wounded or mentally broken, haunted by the memories of combat. Civilians, struggling to rebuild their lives amidst the ruins, carried the trauma of bombing raids, displacement, and the loss of loved ones. Section 3. Shifting Sands of Power. A new world order emerges. As the dust settled on World War II, it became clear that the conflict had fundamentally reshaped the global balance of power. The old European empires, weakened by years of fighting and burdened by the rising tide of anti-colonial sentiment, lay in ruins. Into the void stepped two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, each representing a different ideological vision for the post-war world. The United States, emerging from the war with its economy intact and its military might unmatched, embraced a vision of a world order based on democracy, free trade, and international cooperation. The Soviet Union, having borne the brunt of the fighting against Nazi Germany, sought to secure its borders and expand its sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. The wartime alliance between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union, forged in the crucible of conflict, began to unravel as the ideological differences between the two blocs became increasingly apparent. The seeds of distrust and suspicion sown in the closing months of the war would soon blossom into a new global rivalry, the Cold War. Section 4. Seeds of Discord, Unresolved Tensions, and the Cold War. Despite the Allied victory, World War II left behind a legacy of unresolved tensions and competing ambitions that would shape the post-war world. The division of Europe into Eastern and Western blocs, separated by the metaphorical Iron Curtain, created a climate of suspicion and mistrust that fueled an arms race and proxy wars across the globe. The ideological conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, capitalism versus communism, became the defining struggle of the Cold War. Both superpowers sought to expand their spheres of influence, leading to the formation of military alliances, such as NATO and the Warsaw Pact, and the escalation of tensions in hotspots around the world. The Cold War cast a long shadow over the second half of the 20th century, shaping international relations, influencing domestic politics, and fueling technological innovation. The threat of nuclear annihilation hung over the world, a stark reminder of the stakes involved in the ideological struggle between East and West. Section 1. The Atomic Age, Science's Double-Edged Sword. The dawn of the Atomic Age, ushered in by the blinding flashes over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, cast a long shadow over the post-war world. The awesome power unleashed by splitting the atom, a testament to human ingenuity, simultaneously promised unimaginable progress and threatened unprecedented destruction. The world had entered a new era, one where the very survival of humanity hung in the balance. The development of nuclear weapons, driven by the desperate need to defeat Nazi Germany and later fueled by Cold War paranoia, triggered a global arms race. The United States and the Soviet Union, locked in an ideological struggle, amassed vast arsenals of nuclear weapons, each capable of annihilating entire cities in a blinding flash. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, a chilling acronym for a terrifying concept, became the perverse logic governing superpower relations. Yet even as the shadow of nuclear annihilation loomed large, the scientific breakthroughs of World War II paved the way for peaceful applications of atomic energy. Nuclear power, once a harbinger of destruction, held the promise of a clean and nearly limitless source of energy. Medical isotopes, derived from nuclear processes, offered new hope for diagnosing and treating diseases. Section 2. Technological Advancements. from battlefield to daily life. The crucible of World War II proved to be a catalyst for technological innovation, accelerating the development of inventions that would reshape the post-war world. Technologies initially designed for military purposes soon found their way into civilian life, transforming industries, revolutionizing communication, and improving the lives of millions. Radar, developed to detect enemy aircraft and ships, found new applications in air traffic control, weather forecasting, and even speed traps. Jet engines, initially powering fighter planes, revolutionized air travel, shrinking distances and connecting continents. Computers, once room-sized behemoths used for code breaking, evolved into increasingly powerful and compact machines, laying the foundation for the digital revolution. The war also spurred advancements in medicine, materials science, and manufacturing techniques. Penicillin, a miracle drug discovered just before the war, saved countless lives on the battlefield and revolutionized the treatment of bacterial infections. Synthetic rubber, developed to replace wartime shortages of natural rubber, found new uses in tires, footwear, and countless other products. Mass production techniques, honed in the factories producing weapons and ammunition, were applied to consumer goods, making them more affordable and accessible to the masses. Section 3. The Dawn of Diplomacy, International Organizations, and the Quest for Peace. The horrors of World War II, the unprecedented scale of destruction, and the unimaginable human suffering served as a stark reminder of the need for international cooperation and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. The desire to prevent another global conflagration, to spare future generations the horrors endured, fueled the creation of international organizations dedicated to diplomacy, dialogue, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. The United Nations, founded in 1945 on the ashes of the failed League of Nations, emerged as a beacon of hope in a world yearning for peace. With a mandate to maintain international peace and security, promote social progress, and uphold human rights, the UN provided a forum for nations to air their grievances, seek common ground, and work towards a more just and equitable world order. Beyond the UN, other international organizations emerged to address specific challenges, from promoting economic development and trade to fostering cultural exchange and scientific collaboration. The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, UNESCO, and the World Health Organization, among others, sought to create a more interconnected, prosperous, and peaceful world. The hope was that by working together, nations could address the root causes of conflict and build a more stable and secure future. Section 4. Echoes on the world stage, shaping modern geopolitics. Even as the world sought to move beyond the horrors of World War II, the conflict cast a long shadow over international relations, shaping the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. The war's end marked the beginning of a new era, one characterized by the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, the dismantling of colonial empires, and the rise of new centers of power. The division of Europe, formalized with the creation of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, created a climate of suspicion and mistrust that fueled proxy wars and regional conflicts across the globe. The struggle for ideological supremacy between capitalism and communism played out in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and countless other hotspots, often with devastating consequences for the local populations caught in the crossfire. The war also accelerated the process of decolonization, as European powers, weakened by years of conflict, faced growing demands for independence from their colonial subjects. India, Pakistan, Indonesia, and countless other nations in Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean gained their independence in the decades following World War II, reshaping the political map of the world and ushering in a new era of self-determination. Section 1. The Enduring Significance. More than just a historical event, World War II stands as a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for both destruction and resilience. The echoes of this global conflict reverberate even today, shaping our world in profound and often unseen ways. From the geopolitical order to technological advancements, from the delicate balance of international relations to the ever-present threat of nuclear war, the legacy of World War II continues to influence the course of human events. As we grapple with the challenges of the 21st century, the lessons learned from this devastating conflict remain as relevant as ever. The importance of international cooperation, the fragility of peace, and the need to confront intolerance and extremism head-on are all principles forged in the crucible of war. World War II serves as a stark warning against repeating the mistakes of the past, a call to action for all who seek a more just, equitable, and peaceful world. The study of World War II, while undoubtedly a somber undertaking, offers invaluable insights into the complexities of human nature, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the enduring power of hope and resilience. By remembering the sacrifices of those who fought and died in this conflict, by honoring the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust and other atrocities, we ensure that their stories continue to resonate, serving as a beacon of hope and a reminder of our shared responsibility to strive for a better future. By understanding the causes, consequences, and enduring legacy of World War II, we equip ourselves with the knowledge and perspective necessary to navigate the challenges of our own time. The world we live in today, shaped by the events of the past, demands that we remain vigilant in our pursuit of peace, understanding, and cooperation. Only through a collective commitment to these ideals can we hope to build a future free from the specter of war and ensure that the sacrifices of previous generations were not in vain.